City streets, paved with gold, but not quite in the way you'd think. Fred Cleary, a businessman, a shrewd property developer, and the inheritor of a vision, fighting for something in the city where there is no cash problem.
I think what we've done in the city really has been remarkable, because after all it's only a square mile, or a square mile and a quarter. It really is a place where people come to work, but it's not a place where you would expect people to concentrate on gardens, but we've done just that. What concerns me is when I walk around parts of London and some of the great cities, there's very poor environmental standards that exist. And I wonder sometimes who cares?
25 years ago, that square mile and a quarter looked after fewer than 40 gardens. Today there are 168, and soon to be one more. Why? 100 years ago, a handful of people formed the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association. Their aim, to create all over London green spaces for everyone to enjoy. 23 years ago, the chairman of that association was elected to the Common Council of the City of London. The city, for the first time, set up a new, separate committee for trees, gardens and open spaces.
That's the magic. Talking nothing but the environment. The secret is to have this committee that talks about nothing else but the environment. If you don't have that, then anything like a tree is almost under other business on the works committee or something like that. And everybody wants to go home at the end of the agenda.
The opportunities for the creation of open space vary with time. Immediately after the war, when there were opportunities for redevelopment, obviously the opportunities for creating gardens were there. Bombed churches, churchyards were deconsecrated and then taken over as public open space and laid out as small gardens where lunchtime workers could go and sit. Now there may be opportunities for very small gardens on redevelopment if one loads back plot ratios, we call it. Now, sorry to use the jargon, but what it means is this, is that although land is very, very expensive in the city, you can still afford to use a small parcel of land as a garden if the total development you are aiming at can be put on the remainder of the land. In other words, you don't have to take in that little piece of land to achieve your development, and therefore if you load your plot ratio back, as we say, you might get the chance of a little garden.
This is the garden of St. Alfred's. That's the old Roman wall. I think a church hasn't been here for 100 years or more. It's outside the hall of the Salters Company, and they came to me and said that they thought they'd like, although it's corporation land, they'd like to make a garden. And the result is that we agreed terms with them, at least, laid the garden out and maintained it. They must have paid a great deal of money to lay out the garden, and I think a tremendous contribution to the environment of this part of the city. But when we opened it, there must have been 200 people here, you see.
I'm always rather apprehensive about gardens, because one day at the Mansion House there was a certain Mr. Cleary standing quite near me, and I heard him say, "I'll get the old sod turned over." And I thought it was me he was talking about, but in actual fact he's determined to get me to dig a hole somewhere in a garden. I thought tonight was the occasion, so I've come dressed like this with the excuse not to have to perform.
By no means is thought as unique. I myself, in the last 10 years since I've been an alderman, I know of about 18 or 19 gardens that have been opened, basically pieces of waste ground or slight arrangements made between the owners of properties who've given a little piece of their land in order to create a garden for the public.
Here, the lead was to put back an open space which was lost more than 100 years ago. The new committee saw the value of opening up the site, persuaded the corporation to buy the old building on the right, pull it down, and make a garden there. But that wasn't the end of it.
And then we extended it right the way round. You can see the immense garden here. And I said to the corporation, well, look, you're never going to build on this. Why not lease it to the plasterers company and let them look after it? And they pay £1 a year.
I'm sure that it has been very useful in the case of the city to have a separate Trees, Gardens and Open Spaces subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Planning Committee in effect, because it means that a great deal of energy can be concentrated on providing the gardens. Furthermore, as a subcommittee of the Planning Committee, they know what's going on in the redevelopment of the city, and they can see where roads are being put through, where there might be opportunities for creating little open spaces on either side of a new road. You see, whenever there's a public works, like roads, for example, they present opportunities for redevelopment.
I lost a garden here, you see, because of this redevelopment. He said, don't worry, we're going to throw up a few more spaces for you. And this is what's happened. These have all been created as a result of the new roadway. This was all asphalt at one time. Asphalt. We can grow quite a lot in about a foot of earth. In fact, we've got some lawns growing in the city where there's about 4 inches of earth.
We really must do something about this site. Yes. It really is in the heart of the city of London, and even behind us, look, it's something that...
Well, I agree with that, Jim. Well, we have put those tubs there as an interim measure, but the difficulty is that it really isn't ours, and we've got to get in touch with the owners of the building.
Well, how many owners are there?
Well, the ground belongs to 2, and the building is leased by this company.
It's one thing to sit in a committee room and look at a drawing, but it's another thing to go out on foot and see it in the flesh. And as a result, we find by walking around the city constantly, we gather up new ideas. Somebody said, well, you know, there's a space down there where you can plant a tree. There's a piece of land. Does anybody know anything about it? And so we go out, and we have an itinerary, and then we go back to Guildhall and finish the meeting.
Understanding between the elected members and the officers is vital. Here, with the chairman and one of the committee, Christopher Mitchell, is the superintendent of Parks and Gardens.
You may as well plant a good show than...
The elected representative decides what policy shall be carried out. They will say, we will take every opportunity we can of creating gardens in the city. And this can be dealt with by ideas coming out of the committee, or it may well be that officers themselves have ideas which they think the committee would like to consider as policy, and so the officers prepare a paper and they put it up to the committee, and the committee say yes or no, and there's a very full and fair discussion on the whole problem. And at the end of the day, when they've decided what they want to do, then it's up to the officers to go and do it, because the officer's job is to implement that policy.
But what about those trees around the garden that died last year, the limes? They're the new ones, are they?
Well, yes, these newly planted.
We take the advice of the officers because, I mean, we've got the best advice in the world. I mean, these chaps have been looking after this square mile for a very long time, and they have a deep knowledge of what will grow here and what won't grow here, and all the attendant problems of public gardens.
Before the Trees, Gardens and Open Spaces Committee was formed, we had something like 450 trees in the city. Today we have maybe 2,500. This piece of equipment helps me to detect if there are any cables or pipes underneath the footway, so that we don't have to make any abortive digs, therefore wasting time and money.
If you were to come here 10 years ago, all you would have seen would be stone and asphalt. And we therefore decided to landscape with the trees that you can see, an avenue of trees and shrubs, and to bring the whole thing to life. Recently, because of the royal wedding, television companies found when they put their cameras up, the trees were in the way, or some trees, and asked us to take them down, and I protested. The television people said, well, it didn't matter what the cost was, they put the trees back. Well, you can't put big trees back. So we said, well, we'll trim them, but we're not going to take the trees down.
The professionals have an answer to most problems. This garden was used as a shortcut, till people were stopped in their tracks by gorse. Professionals can have an eye for a bargain, whether it's a natural fence or free plant pots, sewer pipes salvaged by the gardeners. The cheapest carpet of all, a site waiting to be developed, turned into a temporary garden. Even in the Barbican, a huge housing development, proof that neither plants nor flowers need be earthbound. The gardeners filled every window box with soil and planted them before people moved in. When flats change hands, the gardeners do the same again to get the new tenants growing. The professionals welcome the help of hundreds of amateurs. Today there's no space for a single new seat without a fight, and no space is too small to fight for. Shade is a problem, but as gardeners know, some plants will survive and even enjoy difficult conditions. Ferns and bracken naturalize in a dark corner.
This is another difficult garden, but it's been rather successful. We just about got enough light in here to do something with it. It was smaller, but 80 years ago the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association bought and presented an extra quarter acre. It's opened it up a bit, and the seats are still a reminder.
The man with the original vision, the original energy, was Lord Meath, who founded the association. He knew that commerce, as well as nature, abhor a vacuum. Railways, offices, homes without gardens, and even public buildings will always encroach on open space. In the whole of metropolitan London, Meath and his association fought back. They raised money for new gardens and looked after them.
What have we got here?
Quite a different type of garden.
Yes.
Different church, different area.
Trees.
Nothing the same.
Nice variety.
Yes.
Today, the association stimulates interest in church gardens in the whole metropolitan area. They're judged, awards given, and advice passed on.
Well, you can tell him what to do for
Yes,
that,
yes,
can't you?
selective retailer, which I've put in our notes there.
Yes. And I'm told that the man who does it grows a lot of the things
Yes,
and cuttings.
In the city, the association, with the Worshipful Company of Gardeners, has for many years promoted a window box campaign. The result? Colour throughout the city, throughout the year, bringing brightness and warmth to the commercial centre, and winning the city the Britain in Bloom competition for 11 consecutive years. Creating new gardens has always been the priority. Whatever the size, there is a struggle. Greater today because of the land values and the cost of upkeep.
Although we can't claim in the last 20 years to have laid out so many open spaces as we did in our first 20 years of existence, we nevertheless have been able to lay out something like 5, which is quite remarkable considering the little amount of space that is left available.
It must be said that at times like these, times of financial restraint, gardens are probably the most vulnerable casualties, because when you are looking at your budget, obviously there's a great deal of expenditure on other services which you can't avoid. They're contractual liabilities which might have arisen years ago, like the building of the Barbican Art Centre. You can't stop building that in the middle and spending money. And so therefore you look at areas like maintenance. And quite clearly, if you've got a garden and you've got to cut back next to a road that needs repairing, most people would say, well, your first priority must be to repair the road. But the time's going to come when you've got to do something about the garden, otherwise it just becomes a bit of a rubbish tip full of Coca-Cola tins and paper and rubbish. And if you allow that to happen, I'm afraid you're going to get a shabby city. And if you get a shabby city, that, I think, means that you're going to get a far less satisfied community.
There are little areas that we've had cause to go back time and time again to remonstrate with the local authority that really it's rather disappointing, having spent all this money on laying the ground out, to have it maintained so badly and so disappointingly and so untidily. And obviously it's the public who make it untidy, so perhaps there's an area of education there that one could look at.
The association has tried many ways to stimulate the interest of those who will benefit from their gardens. For people restricted to cities for most of the year, little gardens are their countryside. Though few have inherited Lord Meath's commitment, there's not a local authority in Britain which has not been influenced by Meath's ideas. His plan to make parks, gardens and recreation grounds where they're most needed is being realised by the Greater London Council at Burgess Park. Dave Sadler, Park Superintendent, is the officer carrying out the instructions of the elected members of his council. He brings them into life.
This is the plan we're working towards, but really all around us we have a densely populated area of high-rise flats. And some of the schools which are in this area have only asphalt playgrounds. So we've provided 2 nature areas in the park. Now you've got to be very careful as you walk through here because of these nettles. They sting, don't they? So you must be very, very careful. You mustn't touch the leaves. This area was an old bomb site, left over from the war. We brought in lorry loads of peat and topsoil and broadcast it across the area and asked the local school children if they would like to come in as an exercise with us and plant the bulbs, naturalising the bulbs. And they're elderberries. And no, you wouldn't eat these, but they make elderberry wine and jellies and that sort of. The teachers bring the children here and we allow timber to drop on the ground and fungus to come up. But what have we got there? Look, we've got woodlice. Look, see that? See the little woodlouse? See that? Look, put that in your hand. No? Why not? How about you? No, they don't bite. Don't put your hand out. See how many legs? It's a little woodlice. There's a great big one there. No? No? There's a nice plant that's grown indoors. The greenhouse is open to the public 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. You can buy them in the shops at East Street Market. This is an area of high-rise flats. We decided not to deal with giving people instructions on looking after their gardens because they haven't any. We've taken the plants that you can pick up in Woolworths and Marks and Spencers and we've put them in here to show how to propagate them, how to look after them and how to care for them. Nice one, isn't it? You see? See the pink flower? We've got young children who come back after school with their parents or grandparents. They tell them what they can grow in their flat or on their balcony. They're called elephant's ears. You see the size of them? I've heard them saying, look, I told you can come here and see what's going on. I think this helps tremendously because we've got a lot of old people living around here and it brings the young and old together. It really helps to make the community and really this is our responsibility.
Yeah, we go there again one day, eh? All right?
If the needs are for wide open spaces where children can run because the borough has a large population with no gardens, then they must be very clearly defined. And the officers must carry out the policy so laid down. The officers will have the expertise to do it, and if the money is available, the council will have the legal powers to do it. So there shouldn't be an obstacle, apart from money, to the provision of these things. And if money is short, proceed in penny packets, I think is the best advice one can give.
Often, it's not just money, but concern. That's why every city needs the ideas of the association and men of vision.
This site was a site of temporary shops which were put up when the corporation was building just beyond there a block of flats and shops, and when that was completed the shops were pulled down, and I said, well, this is a place where we can make a Jubilee garden. The corporation agreed to that and we designed the garden. This is a very difficult part of the city because there's a short cut across here and used to trample our garden to pieces. So if you say it's another problem, well, problems are to be solved. You've got to, you don't give in, you just find an answer. So railings became the answer. The corporation said, well, we haven't got any railings and they're expensive. I said, go down the Old Kent Road to one of these scrap yards. And they did just that and bought the railings for peanuts. when we were creating the garden, it was obviously that outside the pub next door was old dustbins overflowing, and I went to see them and said, look, we're going to make this lovely garden here, can you do something about your dustbins? And he did just that. He built a container, has been very cooperative, which is another example of people working happily with the corporation.
I cannot think of a single instance in the city where the chairman of the Trees, Gardens and Open Spaces Subcommittee has not been personally involved. He is a man of great enterprise. He is also a practical man. And having a property background himself, not only can he see potential, but also he knows people to talk to, companies to talk to, who might be persuaded, I might even use the word cajoled sometimes, into providing land, into putting window boxes into new developments, all these things to make the place really rather nicer to live in.